Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Level Up Short. This time I wanted to talk to you about prototyping. So let's get started. First of all, I get a lot of questions from developers I work with, and they're like, well, why should I bother to prototype? Seems like a waste of time. I should just start developing. I'm going to have to develop it anyway. So I'm here today to make the argument for why prototyping is essential for developing your game. First, starting off, number one bullet point here for prototyping. Prototypes are critical for detecting design flaws and oversights early in development. And the key word here is early, because the sooner that you discover that there's an issue with your design or that there's a technical limitation, the more time that you're going to save. Imagine if you don't prototype and 2 to 3 months into development, you discover, okay, well, this idea is not really going to work. You just lost 2 to 3 months of development, right? So that's point number one. My second argument is finding the fun. Now, this is arguably the most difficult aspect of design, is making sure that the features that we design, given all of the goals that are required in order to succeed with that feature, making sure that that feature is actually fun. So prototyping is going to give you a jump start on that, and it's going to send you in the right direction to make sure that the feature that you're building is enjoyable for your players. For a third point here, prototypes are excellent for fine-tuning your design before production. Everyone can come up with an idea. It's not as easy to fill in the gap in terms of what's actually going to make this feature work and make it fun for our players, right? So prototyping are going to tease out those questions and allow you to come up with answers sooner in development. Finally, you're going to be able to identify roadblocks sooner. And this isn't just for finding the fun or things like that. Could be technical limitations. Maybe you're doing something that's physics intensive. Maybe you're doing something that's art intensive and is going to heavily rely on the performance of the device that your players are playing on, right? It's going to be great to be able to identify that sooner rather than later in development. Okay, so now that I've established that and hopefully convinced you why prototyping is so important, I wanted to talk about the different prototyping methods at your disposal. Starting up first, my personal favorite as a designer, paper prototypes. And from my experience, these are heavily underutilized by developers out there. So a paper prototype is when you take any sort of props that you have in the physical world, such as paper, board game pieces, Legos, dice, and other props in order to simulate a slice of your game. And we're going to talk about some of those slices of your game that are good to prototype later on. The interesting thing about paper prototypes is, depending on what it is that you're prototyping, you can get them up and running much sooner than you could for something that you're developing in our second prototyping method, which are studio prototypes. So studio prototypes obviously are just quick playable versions of a set of systems that you have in your game. So obviously these are things that you're building with code. These are things where you're putting in maybe minimal art assets, but you're just trying to test out a small bite-sized portion of your game. So hopping in here, I wanted to talk about the pros and the cons of each of these prototyping methods, starting with paper prototypes and starting with the positives. So let's talk about the pros of doing a paper prototype for your game or a slice of your game. For our first pro, paper prototypes are insanely quick to create, right? So rather than spending a week, 2 weeks setting up a prototype in studio, you could spend an afternoon. And that's a true story here. Our very own Erin put together this paper prototype in the afternoon because we didn't have an image of a paper prototype. So you could just see, even in practice here, she was able to put together a pizza making system in an afternoon, right? And that's just a very, very quick turnaround. That's going to allow you to test out, as you can see here, like your UI. You can test out the gameplay, see if it's fun, right? Very, very quickly without using a lot of man hours from your team in order to do so. Secondly, it's very easy to modify. In our example here of creating pizzas, right? Maybe this UI isn't working for you. That's fine. Just shift some things around real quick, print out another piece of paper. If you're using pencil for it, you can just erase it, write something differently, right? And you can quickly iterate and get to the answers to your questions much sooner than if you have to manually script it, build it, and test it in your world, right? Paper prototypes are great for seeing a wider view of your game as well, right? Paper prototypes are great for testing out game rules, just the general look and feel of your game. You can do that in a paper prototype very, very quickly. And so that's going to allow you to generally see a lot more systems working together in tandem than you typically would with a prototype in studio that's going to take you, 1 to 2 weeks to stand up. It's also, in my opinion, the best way to test UI and UX for your game, right? You can print out a phone or an image of a phone. You can print out different screens. You can test where the buttons are going to be, where your fingers are going to be on the phone, right? And you can much more rapidly iterate on the controls for your game, the UI for your game, the different menus of your game than you ever could by requiring, your scripter to put something together in studio, your artist to put together a UI mockup, et cetera, right? So paper prototypes are just great for a lot of different aspects of game development and testing them out sooner and quicker than you could in studio. Now for the cons of our paper prototypes, right? The work obviously is not reusable. I think if you went up to a Roblox player and you handed them this piece of paper, they'd look at you like, well, what are you doing? This isn't Roblox, right? So obviously you can't reuse this work. It's just very nice for standing up, overnight and then just testing very quickly with your team before you actually start building stuff in studio. Secondly, it cannot simulate unique mechanics as easily, right? Picture you have like a grappling hook mechanic in your game. I don't know how you're going to do that with paper prototype. Maybe you go out and you get a real grappling hook and you try it out, but it's not going to be, as simple to test out those mechanics in a paper prototype. Then finally, it might lead to some false positives. Board games obviously are really fun. Making pizzas is really fun, but you might end up actually putting it in the studio later and there's some issues that, doing it on a computer or doing it on a phone aren't as fun as they were when they were in paper. So just keep that in mind as you're doing your paper prototypes. Moving on, let's talk about our studio prototypes and the pros and cons of those. So starting off, the studio prototypes are great for identifying technical issues early. So as I said, with that grappling hook mechanic, something physics-based, right? You could detect earlier on how feasible that idea is, how workable it is, and in the unlikely case that it's not going to work, you're going to be able to pivot much sooner, right? Studio prototypes are also great for testing more experimental ideas. So similar to what I was saying before, something that you're not too sure of and you really just need to get into your game as soon as possible, right? That's when you want to go to a studio prototype and you want to sort of build it out and actually see within your game, is this going to actually work? The work is reusable and actually it's going to set a very great pace for development, right? So rather than just starting to cobble together a bunch of ideas in studio, you could sit down with your team, decide what is this vertical slice going to look like, build it out very quickly, get a nice eagle-eye view of what your game or feature is going to be, and then start to build on top of that foundation that you created, right? So studio prototypes are just a great way to start off development and really get you, I guess in this case, to the starting line of production, once you've proved out the general idea of your feature or your game. Now for the cons of a studio prototype, obviously it's a smaller scope of testing. It just naturally takes more time to script something, debug it, test it out, rip something out, put it back in, get your artist to create content, right? Versus just printing out a piece of paper and taking a Sharpie and writing over it, right? Just obviously it's going to take a longer time. So keep that in mind. And then secondly, as I said, there's more time required to iterate. If you are prototyping a UI and you find out it doesn't necessarily work, or you don't really like the size of the button, or you don't really like how the user is interacting with it, that's just going to take more time and more people from your team in order to iterate versus somebody erasing something on a piece of paper, right? So just keep that in mind. So next comes, what should you prototype, right? If you're trying to build out every single thing of your feature in a prototype, well, at that point, you're just developing a feature. You're not actually prototyping, right? So prototypes should be fast, quick, and hit certain aspects of your feature, but not the whole feature. So these are a few of the things I would identify as the critical things that you should be prototyping, even if your game is live or if you're just starting a new game, some of the things that you should be prototyping. First, as a designer, I will always evangelize about this. Make sure that you have your core loop in, make sure that it's fun. This is one of the first things that you should be prototyping when you're starting out a new feature or when you're starting out a new game. Secondly, your UI and your UX. Paper prototyping is excellent for this. I see no reason not to do this. It doesn't have to be on a piece of paper. It could be on a whiteboard, could be on a chalkboard, whatever you want it to be, right? But just being able to put it in there, see how you're going to interact with it is going to save you a ton of hours of development. Unique game mechanics, as I said, right? These are the things that if you cannot get them working and they're an essential part of your feature obviously is not going to work. So these should be some of the very first things that you're prototyping before you start proper development of a feature. Game rules. This is another great thing for paper prototypes, also applicable to your studio prototypes as well. But again, when you're starting out with a feature, you have a high level idea of what that feature is going to be. Getting something concrete that you can play through is going to bring up a lot more questions and require you to answer a lot more of those questions. So game rules are another excellent thing to prototype. So now that you know what you're going to prototype, now you could play test that prototype. And these are the steps that I would identify in order to efficiently and productively test out your prototype. First, you want to iron out the edge cases and ambiguous gameplay with your team. So you want to sit down with your initial build, write down any ideas that you have, any questions that come up, answer those questions, put them back into your next iteration of your prototype, and continue that process until you're generally happy. Playtest several sessions with your team to ensure that, yes, this is the prototype that we want to present to other people. Then you can reach out to friends, family, followers on social media channels or in different groups that you have on Roblox, schedule sessions and have them play, right? After all, these are the people who will be playing this feature once it's live. So the earlier you can get feedback on them, the better you're going to set yourself up for success in the future. And then finally, you want to iterate until happy. Again, prototypes are great for ironing out edge cases and figuring out what you want this feature to be, but they're not the feature that you're actually building. So don't dwell on it for too long. Just iterate until you're happy. So that's all I have for you today on prototypes. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you found this useful, and stay tuned for more shorts like this in the future.